Chapter 1. The wind screamed across the dunes like a warning whispered through clenched teeth. Cold, salty air bit Detective Elsie Shaw's face as she stepped out of her unmarked sedan. Her boots sank into the sand, the crunch beneath them muffled by the crashing waves in the distance. She hated this beach, Wanda, not just for the eerie quiet or the memories it dragged up from the shadows of her mind, but for what had happened here. What kept happening here? A body had washed up again. Teenage girl. Red swimsuit. Neck slashed. Her name was Harper Doyle, 16 years old, daughter of a local schoolteacher. Missing for 3 days. Her friends thought she'd run away. Her mother insisted she wouldn't. Shaw wished the mother had been right. She ducked beneath the yellow tape, nodding to the young constable standing guard, then crouched beside the forensic team who had just finished examining the scene. The girl's body lay half-covered with a white tarp, her limbs stiff and awkward. Blood had soaked into the sand around her as ink spilled across the parchment. "Say Mamo," said Forensic Officer Dev Patel without looking up. Shaw's throat tightened. Slashed throat. Beach. Teenage girl. Yeah. Her stomach churned. She looked down at Harper's lifeless face, framed by wet strands of blonde hair. Something about her expression, peaceful but not serene, made Shaw's breath catch. As if the girl had known what was coming. As if she'd accepted it. Behind her the surf roared. Shaw stood and walked a few paces away, letting the ocean wind whip at her coat. She lit a cigarette, shielding the flame from the gusts with her cupped hands, even though she'd promised herself she'd quit. Her gaze drifted up to the beach. 58 years ago, 2 girls had been found here, slaughtered in the sand. The Wanda Beach murders, still unsolved, still haunting Sydney's underbelly like a shadow that never lifted. Now this, 3 girls in 6 months, all between 15 and 17. All were killed the same way. And always here at Wanda. Coincidence didn't exist in her line of work. Elias Brandt, her partner, arrived moments later. His usual unshaven face grim. "Mother's been taken to the station. She's a wreck." Shaw exhaled slowly. "We need to pull all surveillance between Wanda and Cronulla. Traffic cams, public transport, anything. I want a complete picture of this girl's last 24 hours. He nodded. "You think it's the same guy? I think it's someone who wants us to think that. Or someone picking up where the last one left off." Brandt's brow furrowed. "You think this ties to the original murders?" She flicked ash into the sand. "I think the killer does." The breeze carried a silence that stretched between them like a taut rope. Brandt broke it. "You ever going to tell me why this case eats at you more than the others?" She looked at him, the corners of her mouth twitching. No, he didn't press. He never did. They left the beach behind, the cold tide licking at the edges of the past. And the girl in the sand, just another echo of a scream no one had ever really heard. Later that night, in the quiet of her apartment, Shaw opened a box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were faded newspaper clippings, brittle and yellowed with age. Photos of 2 girls with pixie cuts and summer smiles. Christine Sharrock and Marianne Schmidt. Their names still haunted the nation. Her mother had known them, grown up just streets away. The day they died, her mother had been grounded and stuck at home for sneaking cigarettes. Lucky, she'd called it once. But Shaw didn't believe in luck. She opened the folder marked with her mother's name, Angela Shaw, and stared at the interview transcript tucked inside. "I saw someone. I never told anyone." Shaw's fingers trembled. The past had just clawed its way back. And it was still hungry. Chapter 2. The interrogation room smelled like old coffee and desperation. Harper Doyle's mother sat across from Elsie Shaw, fingers twisted in her cardigan sleeves, eyes red-rimmed and glassy. Her grief was heavy and erratic, like a wounded animal that didn't know if it should lash out or collapse. Shaw watched her closely. Harper didn't have any enemies, the mother whispered, voice cracked like dry porcelain. She was a good kid. Smart. Kind. She helped me care for my mother when she got sick. Why would anyone? She'd been meeting anyone lately? Anyone online? Shaw asked gently. She wasn't like that, the mother said too quickly. She wasn't careless. That pause, that flicker of doubt, scraped something raw in Shaw. We're not judging her, Shaw said. We just need to know everything. No detail too small. She hesitated, then nodded. There was a boy. Maybe. She'd been secretive, texting more, hiding her screen. I asked her, but she just smiled. Said it was nothing. Shaw's pen didn't stop moving. Did she go to Wanda Beach often? The mother shook her head. No. She hated the ocean. Always said the beach creeped her out. Then why go there? Why die there? Hours later, Shaw sat in front of her board at the precinct. The case laid out in clippings, photos, and string. Red circles glared like open wounds. Harper Doyle, Mila Carson, Jasmine Lee. 3 girls, same death, same beach. Brant leaned against the wall behind her, arms crossed. You think the killer knew about your mom? Shaw didn't answer immediately. I think someone's making a point. A damn personal one. He frowned. You think she lied in that interview? No. I think she saw something she buried so deep that she forgot how much it mattered. Or convinced herself it didn't. Brant stepped forward. You're not going to let this go, are you? I already did once, Shaw said. I'm not making that mistake again. She stood and pulled a photo from the 1965 folder. An old black and white of Christine and Marianne. Next to it, she pinned Harper's yearbook photo. 2 timelines. 1 horror. Same beach. And maybe, just maybe, the same eyes watching. At 2 a.m., Shaw found herself back at Wanda. Alone. The moon was a cold plate of glass overhead, casting everything in silver. The sand whispered beneath her boots. The air felt too still. Too aware. She paced along the dunes, flashlight sweeping across driftwood and seaweed, the crash of waves setting a steady pulse in her ears. A gull cried overhead. Then silence. She stopped. Something moved. A shadow near the rocks. Too smooth to be natural. Too steady. She drew her gun, cautious but calm. Police, she called out. No answer. She moved closer, gun and light forward. Then a sound, breath quick and sharp. She reached the outcrop and found nothing. But on the stone surface, half buried in sea mist and sand, lay something glinting under her light. Necklace. Thin gold chain. Tiny charm shaped like a starfish. Her stomach dropped. She'd seen it in the photo on Harper's Instagram. She wore it every day. It hadn't been recovered with the body, which meant someone had come back. Or never left. Chapter 3. The next morning, a thick coastal fog rolled through Sydney like a slow-moving phantom. Detective Elsie Shaw sat hunched over her desk, Harper Doyle's necklace wrapped around her fingers. She hadn't slept. The chill from the beach still clung to her bones. She replayed the night in her mind, again and again. The glint of gold. The sense of being watched. She'd checked the area herself and combed every crevice with a flashlight until dawn. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of a struggle. Just that single necklace on the rocks. Brant walked in carrying 2 coffees. You're not going to believe this. Shaw arched an eyebrow as he handed her the cup. Security footage, he said. Traffic cam caught Harper walking into Wanda Beach Park 2 nights before she was found. Midnight. Alone. That makes no sense. Her mother said she hated the ocean. Right. And here's the kicker. He dropped a printout of a still frame onto her desk. Harper walking under a streetlight. Her eyes were wide. Her mouth was slightly open. Fear. Or surprise. Behind her, barely visible, a figure in a dark hoodie, standing by a bus stop. Can't make out much, Brant added. But facial recognition flagged a possible match. Shaw's blood ran cold. To who? Brant hesitated, then turned the page. Tommy Cartwright. The name punched the air from Shaw's lungs. Tommy Cartwright, former suspect in the 1965 Wanda Beach murders. A teenager then, now a ghost on parole, resurfacing every few years like a bruise under thin skin. Never charged, never cleared. That's impossible, Shaw whispered. He'd be over 70. Brant nodded. I know, but he's in Sydney. He's on record at a halfway house in Parramatta. 2 weeks ago. The old fear returned like a scream in her throat. Get the car, she said. The halfway house was squat, grey, and filled with the weight of forgotten men. They were met by a counselor who led them through dim hallways to a small room at the end. Tommy sat at a table, staring at a newspaper, his face as wrinkled as the pages he flipped through. He looked up slowly. Detectives, he said. Or ghosts? Shaw kept her tone ice. Tommy Cartwright. We need to ask you about Harper Doyle. His eyes gleamed with something between memory and malice. She's dead, isn't she? Shaw didn't answer. Tommy leaned back, tapping a yellowed tooth. Figures. They never stay away from Wanda, do they? It calls them. What were you doing the night Harper disappeared? Brant asked. I was here, watching the rain. Shaw stepped forward. And 60 years ago. Were you watching the rain then too? He chuckled low and dry. Still digging that old grave, are you? What do you want from me? An apology. I was just a boy. They never proved anything. You followed Harper to the beach, Shaw said. I followed a lot of girls. Doesn't mean I killed him. Her jaw clenched. But you know who did. He went quiet. Then, with a grin that didn't touch his eyes, he said, the sand remembers everything, even the blood. But you're not asking the right questions. Brant narrowed his eyes. Meaning? Tommy leaned in, eyes hard. You think this started with those girls in 65? Didn't. Wanda's been cursed a lot longer than that. Back in the car, Brant muttered. What the hell was that? Shaw stared straight ahead. A warning. Or a game. He glanced at her. You believe that stuff? Curses. She didn't answer right away. But in her mind, her mother's voice echoed. I saw someone. I never told anyone. I believe there's more than one way a place can be haunted, she finally said. Brant rubbed his face. So what now? Now, she said, gripping the wheel. We find out who Tommy's protecting, or who picked up the knife he put down. And somewhere, far from the city, a figure burned a hoodie in a barrel behind a motel, watching the flames eat the fabric like time devour secrets. The necklace lay in their pocket. Still warm. Chapter 4. Rain drummed against the windshield like a funeral march as Detective Elsie Shaw steered through the narrow backroads leading to the Doyle residence. The wipers scraped a slow rhythm, clearing her view just enough to see the looming silhouette of the house. Harper's mother, Janine Doyle, lived in a modest fibro cottage tucked into the coastal scrub. The garden was overgrown, the porch light flickering as though it too was shivering from the storm. Brant met her at the front step, already soaked through. Janine's inside, holding it together for now. Shaw nodded and stepped inside. The air smelled like chamomile tea and something sour grief left too long in the sun. Janine sat on the sofa, wrapped in a knitted shawl, fingers twisting a tissue into shreds. Her eyes were bloodshot but dry. She looked up, saw Shaw, and straightened. Detective, have you found who did it? Not yet. Shaw crouched beside her. But we're close. Janine's eyes filled. She was just a girl. She wanted to study marine biology. She loved the ocean. Shaw nodded gently, letting silence fill the space. Then she said, Did Harper mention anyone new in her life? Anyone she was seeing? Texting? A stranger she talked about? Janine blinked. No, but she'd been distant lately. Not like her. She said she felt like someone was watching her. That landed like ice on Shaw's spine. Did she say when that started? Janine shook her head. No. Just once about a week ago she came home shaking. Said she saw someone by the dunes, just standing there, staring. Shaw exchanged a glance with Brandt. Beat passed. We'll follow up, Shaw said. And if you think of anything else. Janine's hand trembled as she reached for a coffee table. She left this on the kitchen counter the day she vanished. A worn paperback. The Girls of Summer. Shaw opened it and stopped. Stuffed inside the pages was a folded piece of notepaper, yellowed and brittle. The handwriting wasn't Harper's. It read, "What happened before will happen again. She saw me once. She'll see me again." A chill cut down Shaw's spine. Back at the precinct, the forensics team analyzed the note. The ink is dated to the late 90s. Not recent. But where had Harper found it? Patel tapped the paper. This wasn't written on standard notebook paper. This is from a hospital logbook. See the perforation here. Brandt frowned. Hospital. Psych ward if I had to guess. Specific kind of stock. Shaw leaned over the desk. Get me a list of all nearby mental institutions that operated in the 90s. And cross-reference staff and patients with anyone connected to the Wanda case. On it. Shaw rubbed her eyes, exhaustion nipping at the edges of her mind. Harper's death wasn't isolated. The killer had left a breadcrumb on purpose. This was a game. The next morning brought a new lead. Surveillance footage from a corner store showed Harper 2 days before her disappearance, standing in line behind a man in a dark coat and bucket hat. He turned briefly toward the camera, only half his face visible. Still, it was enough. Shaw froze the frame. She'd seen him before, years ago, in a file connected to her mother's testimony. She pulled the transcript from her desk drawer. Angela Shaw had described a man near the dunes, the day the original murders occurred. Tall, dark coat, limp in his left leg. He whistled something. I think it was a lullaby. Shaw's breath caught. She hit rewind. The man in the footage, he limped. They tracked him to a trailer park outside Sutherland. Name, Graham Lister. 73. A recluse with no criminal record but plenty of neighborhood complaints. Loud music, bonfires, and smells. Shaw and Brandt arrived just past dusk. The trailer was dark, wind chimes clattering against the corrugated walls. She knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. Footsteps inside. Low. Bragging. The door creaked open, revealing a gaunt man with skin like paper and eyes sharp as glass. Detectives, he said, voice smooth. Took you long enough. Shaw stepped forward. We have some questions. Lister smiled. Of course you do. The past always demands answers. She could feel it then, some unseen current beneath his calm. Brandt shifted behind her, hand near his weapon. The air smelled like mildew and old blood. Inside, the trailer was cramped and foul. Walls covered in newspaper clippings. Not just of the Wanda murders, but of other cases. Girls gone missing. Some were never found. Some turned up in places too similar to be a coincidence. Shrine. Lister poured himself tea. You think I killed that girl, don't you? We think you know something, Shaw said. He smiled again. I know many things. About the beach. About your mother. Shaw's hands clenched. You knew her. Oh yes, Lister whispered. Angela. She saw me. But she was smart. Kept quiet. Beat of silence. Until now. As they drove back into the storm, Shaw stared into the dark. They had a name. Connection. A survivor's buried memory. And something told her. Lister wasn't the end of this. He was only the beginning. Chapter 5. The storm hadn't let up. Sheets of rain slashed against the precinct windows as Shaw sat at her desk, her fingers drumming on the edge of the cold metal. The rhythmic taps echoed her racing thoughts. Graham Lister was a step forward, yes, but he was also a riddle wrapped in soaked newspaper. Brant returned from the archives, soaked and tense, a thick manila folder tucked under his arm. He dropped it on the desk. You were right. Lister's name came up in the 1965 reports. Not as a suspect, just a transient, caught trespassing near the dunes 3 days before the girls were killed. Then he vanished. Shaw opened the folder. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. The same crooked smile, the deep-set eyes, the limp. Only younger. And like now, he'd spoken freely and said he'd been at the beach, humming lullabies to the tide. The same description her mother had given. What if he's not the killer? Brant said. What if he just saw something? Shaw didn't answer. Her eyes had landed on a name in the old notes, one that hadn't been flagged before. Dr. Hayden Mirren, psychiatrist, consultant for the police during the original investigation. Interviewed Angela Shaw 3 times. Described her as traumatized but observant. And then nothing. Run Mirren, she said. Find out if he's still alive. Mirren was still alive. Retired. Living in a weather-worn house in the Blue Mountains. Shaw insisted they go that night. They arrived just before midnight. Fog hugged the trees like a secret, the driveway slick with moss. The house loomed, a silhouette against the clouds. Lights off. Brant looked wary. You sure he's not just some old man we're about to scare the hell out of? He interviewed my mother. If anyone knew what she saw, it's him. They knocked. No answer. They knocked again. Finally, a light flickered on. A step. The door creaked open. Dr. Hayden Mirren looked like a man built from ghosts. Towering. A scholar's posture is worn down by time. Detectives, he said, adjusting his glasses. I wondered when you'd come. Inside, his home was neat but sterile. Clinical. Books lined the walls, and classical music whispered from an old speaker. You're investigating Wanda, he said. Not a question. Shaw nodded. You worked with my mother. Angela Shaw. Mirren sat across from them. Angela. Brave girl. But scared. She saw something she wasn't supposed to. She mentioned a man, Shaw said. Dark coat. Limp. Whistled a lullaby. Mirren's brow furrowed. She did. But there was more. He stood and retrieved an old recorder. Cassette. Faint clicking. Then a young voice. Nervous, shaky. He was humming. The same song. Over and over. I think it was a lullaby. But wrong. Like it was backward. He looked at me. I ran. Brant leaned forward. You kept this all these years. Something about her stayed with me, Mirren said. I felt we missed something. Shaw stared at the player. Her mother's voice was younger than she'd ever heard. Terrified. Real. Mirren lowered his voice. Angela said she saw the man again. Weeks later. Near the hospital. Which hospital? Shaw asked. Caraway. Her blood turned to frost. Caraway Psychiatric had closed 2 decades ago after a fire. The same institution Patel suspected the notepaper had come from. Back at the station, Shaw pulled old property records. Caraway sat abandoned, but the land was still under private ownership. A shell company. No clear name. But the last listed maintenance officer, Graham Lister. Her hands trembled as she traced the connection. Lister wasn't just a witness. He had keys. To the hospital. To the past. They assembled a team and moved by morning. Entering Caraway was like stepping into a nightmare half remembered. Mold clawed the walls. Doors sagged on broken hinges. Old patient charts littered the floor. Then they found the basement. And a door. Locked tight. reinforced. Lister had been here recently. Food wrappers, cigarette butts, a cassette tape labeled "To the Watcher." Shaw pocketed it. When they finally got the door open, it led into a soundproofed room. Matted carpet, a child's mobile hanging from the ceiling, turning slowly in the still air. A lullaby played from an unseen source. Shaw froze. Tune. Backwards. Just like her mother had described. The walls were covered in drawings. Girls. Beaches. Blood. Shrine. Fear. Brant's voice cut through the thick silence. "This isn't just a killer." Shaw's whisper was hoarse. "This is a legacy." And someone was determined to keep it alive. Chapter 6. The next morning broke with a haze that clung to the coastline like a memory refusing to fade. Shaw stood at the edge of Wanda Beach, boots sinking slightly into the damp sand. The tide rolled in sluggishly, waves whispering secrets only the dead could understand. She clutched a coffee in one hand, the other buried deep in the pocket of her trench coat. Last night's encounter with Lister left a film of unease she couldn't scrub away. His words, so calm, so deliberate, uncoiled in her mind like a nursery rhyme set to a funeral march. Brant approached from behind. "You think he's the guy?" "I think he's a guy," Shaw replied, eyes fixed on the horizon. "But this isn't just about Lister. He's a piece. A jagged one. There's a bigger picture we're missing." Brant handed her a file. "You might want to see this. Came in this morning from forensics. The fingerprints on the note. Partial match." Shaw opened the folder. Her breath hitched. Angela Shaw. Her mother. But the note was decades old. "How is that possible?" she asked quietly, flipping through the analysis. The note was folded around another piece of paper. Acid transfer might have copied the print. But there's more. The ink. It's traced to a hospital-grade pen. From the 90s. Same as the paper. Shaw turned away from the crashing waves. "We need to go back to where it started." The former site of the Sutherland Psychiatric Hospital was now a construction zone for new beachside apartments, but the foundation of the old building still peeked through the dirt, concrete bones of a forgotten era. With a court order and some firm phone calls, they were granted access to the archives stored in the State Records Office. Yellowing files, patient charts, and admission logs were hauled out of storage. Patel scanned the logs. "We've got a few names that match staff during the 90s. But this one, look at this." He pointed to a line scrawled with shaking handwriting. "Angela Shaw, visitor. Date. February 1996. Who did she visit?" Shaw asked. Patel flipped the page. No name listed. Just a room number. Room 317. Brant raised an eyebrow. "Lister said your mom saw something. What if she didn't just witness something? What if she knew someone inside?" A sick, coiled feeling took root in Shaw's gut. They found the old patient files tied to room 317. Most were long deceased or transferred. But one name stood out, Rosalind Fay. Institutionalized in 1983 after a breakdown. Released 1997. No known relatives. No forwarding address. Shaw whispered the name to herself. It tugged at something distant. Bedtime story maybe. Or the way her mother had paused once, flipping through old photos, touching one face with trembling fingers. They pulled Rosalind's file. Inside was a black and white photograph. A young woman with a sharp jawline, deep-set eyes, and a defiant smile. Shaw's blood ran cold. She looked like Harper. That night, Shaw sat on the edge of her bed, flipping through the pages of her mother's journal. She hadn't opened it in years, not since the funeral. Near the back, she found an entry dated February 1996. "I visited her again. She doesn't speak, but her eyes recognize me now. I told her I forgave her, that I was sorry. The beach still haunts my dreams. I wake to the sound of lullabies." Shaw read the lines again and again. Her fingers trembled. A piece of lined paper slipped from between the pages. Another note. You cannot bury the tide. It always returns. The next morning, a call came from the forensic lab. We analyzed Lister's clippings. Found hair samples under adhesive tape used to mount one article. Match. Harper Doyle. Shaw's eyes narrowed. So he was close to her. Yes, but there's more. The tape also had fibers, consistent with those used in restraints, like the kind used in old psychiatric institutions. Brant stepped into the room. We just got a tip from a woman in Parramatta. Says she saw Harper talking to a woman, older, disheveled, long gray coat, 3 days before she vanished. Said the woman kept calling her Rosie. Shaw felt the pieces shift. A killer wasn't working alone. Or worse, was passing the legacy on. Night fell heavy and unrelenting. At the precinct, Shaw stared at the board covered in string, photos and pinned articles. Lister, Rosalind Fay, Angela Shaw, Harper Doyle. Different decades. Same beach. Same lullaby. She closed her eyes and let the names echo. The dunes weren't silent. They remembered. And someone out there was making sure the past stayed alive. Chapter 7. The rhythm of rain hadn't stopped since the trailer park. Sydney felt like a city drowning under secrets. Each droplet another whisper no one wanted to hear. Detective Shaw stood in her mother's kitchen, a cup of coffee untouched in her hands. Angela sat across from her, quiet, the television murmuring static in the background. The kettle whistled once, long and sharp, before falling silent. Shaw hadn't spoken since they arrived. Angela broke the quiet first. You found him, didn't you? Shaw met her eyes. Graham Lister. Do you remember that name? Angela's fingers curled tighter around the armrest of her recliner. Her jaw moved, but no words came. Finally, she said, I told myself he was dead. He's not. And he remembers you. Angela's mouth quivered. He used to come to the beach. Not often. Just enough. He watched us. You never told the police his name. I didn't know it. Not then. I only knew his eyes. Shaw stepped closer. I need everything you can remember. Angela's gaze turned distant, clouded by decades. He hummed, always humming something under his breath. I didn't realize what it was until I had you. Lullaby. Hush, little baby. That's what he whistled. Sweet and broken. Shaw's heart pounded. And you know what's worse? Angela whispered. I think he followed me. After. For years. Catch glimpses. Cross the street and he'd be there. But no proof. Nothing but shadows. Why didn't you say anything? I was young. No one believed me then. They'd never believe me now. Shaw crouched beside her, voice low. I believe you. And I need you to help me stop him. That night, Shaw sat in her apartment, the lullaby playing on repeat through her earbuds. She'd found 6 different versions online. One was a slow, haunting rendition with a woman's voice barely above a whisper. She looped it, eyes closed. She imagined Lister's voice instead, humming it just out of sight, humming it to Harper, or the girls before her. The buzz of her phone dragged her out of it. Brant. She answered, Yeah, we've got something. Lister used to work at a private facility back in the 80s. Shady place. Shut down in '92. Guess what it specialized in? What? Rehabilitating men convicted of moral offenses. You know, the kind they didn't really treat. Just buried. Shaw's stomach twisted. What was his role? Groundskeeper. Lived on site. Guess who else was there as a teenager? She already knew. Angela Shaw. The next day, Shaw drove out to the ruins of the old facility, now a hollow husk at the edge of the bushlands, 20 minutes past any sign of life. The building sagged like it was trying to forget itself. Graffiti scrawled across the front read, "God hates liars." Inside, the walls whispered mold and rot. Her flashlight cut through the gloom. Rusted gurneys, peeling wallpaper, a child's doll without its head. She walked the halls slowly. The air felt wrong. Room 12B still had a brass plate on the door. Patient records, Shaw knew, had long been destroyed, but she recognized the room from a black and white photo in her mother's sealed court file. This was where Angela had been kept for 6 months after the trauma. Lister had walked these halls. She knelt beside the frame of the bed. A name scratched into the floorboard in jagged letters. Angela. And next to it, a newer carving. I remember. Back at the precinct, Brandt reviewed the list of other patients from the facility's final year. Only a few names were legible. One stuck out. Marjorie Thane. Reported missing in 1993. Never found. And 2 years ago, her daughter vanished from near Wanda Beach. His pulse raced. We're not chasing one crime. We're chasing a pattern. Brandt leaned back. The question is, how many of these girls were connected to women from that facility? Too many. They stared at the board. Faces of girls spanning decades. Some colored red. Some faded with time. All threads in the same web. Outside, the rain finally stopped. But the storm was just beginning. Chapter 8. The autopsy report arrived just after midnight. Shaw sat alone in the precinct, the overhead fluorescents casting stark shadows as she flipped through the pages. The language was clinical, detached, but the meaning pierced like a scalpel. Harper Doyle had seawater in her lungs. Not from swimming. Not from drowning in the surf. The coroner was clear. She'd been held down, inhaling brine, long enough to scar her trachea. And then she'd been moved. The body had been placed elsewhere. Oh, it wasn't just murder. It was a performance. By morning, the team gathered around the board, maps and photos spreading like a web across the wall. The pattern was beginning to emerge. Brandt circled the southern dunes with a red marker. This is where Harper was found. But based on tide analysis, this isn't where she died. Shaw nodded. She was killed somewhere inland, possibly held captive. Patel stepped forward, holding a tablet. I overlaid historic maps. Look at this. He tapped the screen. The dunes had shifted over time, swallowing old infrastructure. One spot jumped out. A disused stormwater tunnel, long forgotten, almost directly beneath where Harper's body had been found. Could explain the seawater, Patel said. Brine runoff collects there. Shaw felt her pulse quicken. Let's go. The tunnel was a ribcage of concrete and rust, buried beneath overgrown brush. The smell hit them first. Rot and salt and something too sour to name. Shaw crouched at the entrance, flashlight slicing through the dark. Inside, they moved slowly, water sloshing around their boots. Then they found it. Small chamber. Old graffiti covered the walls. And in the center, rope. Dried blood. Scraps of fabric. Harper's jacket. Shaw swallowed hard. This was where it happened. The screams would have echoed, lost to the sea wind. But there was more. Brandt found a faded Polaroid nailed to the wall. 2 girls. Blonde. Sunburnt. The date scrawled beneath is January 1965. Back at the precinct, Shaw laid the photo beside one from the original Wanda case. It was the same girl. Christine and Marianne. The killer had been here. Someone was bridging the past and present with surgical precision. Mimicking, honoring, or continuing. Shaw turned to Patel. Run a full DNA panel on the fabric from the tunnel. And fast. She turned to Brandt. We need to talk to Angela. Your mother. She saw the man in 65. And she's hiding more than she's told. Angela Shaw's nursing home overlooked the cliffs. She was lucid today, eyes sharp, breath steady. Shaw sat beside her. You said you saw him. The man. Back then. Angela's hands trembled, her teacup rattling in the saucer. I did. Why didn't you say more? Angela stared out the window. Because I was afraid. And because he wasn't alone. Shaw blinked. What do you mean? Angela turned, voice barely a whisper. There were two of them. One who hunted. One who watched. A chill spread in Shaw's chest. Who? Angela's eyes filled. I think one of them was a cop. That night, Shaw sat alone in her car, overlooking the ocean. The case was no longer a single thread. It was a knot tied in the past, tightening in the present. If Angela was right, the truth ran more profound than anyone imagined. And someone in uniform might be hiding blood on their hands. Shaw clenched the wheel. The storm was coming back. And this time she was ready to walk straight into it. Chapter 9. Lightning split the sky as Detective Elsie Shaw stood alone on the balcony of her apartment, the wind lashing at her coat like an omen. Her mother's words echoed, relentless. One hunted, one watched, one was a cop. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat on the floor of her living room surrounded by files, boxes from the old Wanda case, her own notes, surveillance stills, and forensic reports. She traced timelines, compared officer rosters, and searched for overlaps. And she found one. Detective Colin Barrett, retired, served in the local precinct during the 60s, known for being methodical, quiet, well-liked, too well-liked. He'd been on the scene during the original Wanda investigation, but his name appeared again in files from the 90s. The same psychiatric facility linked to the note Harper found. Barrett had been a security consultant there for 2 years. Too many coincidences. By sunrise, Shaw had a plan. Barrett lived in a weatherboard house near Wanda Beach. It was the kind of place that would feel warm if not for the man who called it home. She went alone. He answered the door wearing a cardigan and a calm, blank smile. Detective Shaw. I was wondering when you'd come. Shaw's heart thudded. We need to talk. He stepped aside. Inside, the house was immaculate. Walls lined with old surfing photos, police memorabilia, and dusty trophies from some other life. She could smell lemon oil and tobacco. You were on the Wanda case, she said. Of course. A dark time. And you worked security at Bankside Psychiatric. Barrett smiled thinly. Briefly. Quiet work, mostly night shifts. Shaw watched him carefully. His eyes were still sharp, still calculating. Harper Doyle found something. Note. Written on hospital ledger paper. Same stock used at Bankside. Terrible tragedy, he said, voice like syrup. I suppose history has a habit of circling back. It does. Shaw stepped closer. Especially when someone keeps guiding it. A long silence. Then Barrett laughed. Almost kind. You're your mother's daughter. Her hand inched toward the holster beneath her coat. Do you know who helped cover it up? He asked. She blinked. What? Barrett tilted his head. Your mother didn't stay quiet because she was afraid. She stayed quiet because someone made her. Someone inside. Shaw froze. She never told you, did she? Barrett said, almost tender. She came to me. Asked for help. Begged. I warned her. Some truths are landmines. Best left buried. He reached into his side drawer. Shaw drew her weapon. Slowly. He complied. Pulled out a small black notebook. Names, he said. Places. We saw. What we ignored. He tossed it to her. She caught it with one hand, never lowering the gun. Why now? She asked. Barrett exhaled, suddenly looking ancient. Because it never stopped. You think Lister acted alone. He was just the blade. Not the hand. The notebook was a minefield. Lists of initials, codes, and dates. Many were connected to known cases. But some were still open. Still active. and one name stood out: Detective Malcolm Brandt. Shaw stared at the page until her vision blurred. Brandt, her partner, her anchor, the man who'd had her back in every corner of this storm. She didn't sleep again that night. Couldn't. The weight of suspicion settled in her bones like a sickness. She had to know. She had to be sure. Because if the rot had reached this deep, she might already be standing in the fire. Chapter 10. The rain lashed the coast with a fury that bent trees and swallowed the sound. Shaw stood at the edge of the bluff, her coat plastered to her frame, Brandt's name echoing in her head like the crash of waves against the rocks below. She had trusted him. He'd been her partner for nearly a decade. They'd bled together in alleys and interrogation rooms. She'd told him things she hadn't said aloud to anyone. And now his name was in Barrett's journal. She turned as Patel approached, hood pulled low, tablet in hand. His eyes flicked with restrained urgency. Lab confirmed the DNA on the rope from the tunnel. He hesitated. It matches Harper. But there's another sample. Male, partial match. Shaw's chest tightened. To who? Patel lowered his voice. Brandt. At the precinct, Brandt sat at his desk, writing in a spiral-bound notepad like it was any other day. The normalcy was a blade. Shaw stepped into the bullpen, eyes fixed on him. My office. Now. He didn't argue. Inside, the air was taut. You're going to want to explain this, Shaw said, sliding the lab report across the desk. She watched his face closely. He read it, blinked once. That's not possible. It's your DNA mark. On the rope. In the tunnel. Next to Harper's blood. I wasn't there. I've never even seen that place. Then someone planted it. Someone with access. Or you've got a secret you haven't shared. His face twisted with something deeper than fear. Shame. I didn't hurt Harper, he said quietly. But I know who might have. They sat in silence as thunder rolled beyond the windows. When I was 19, Brandt began, I dated a girl named Elise. Her dad was a cop. Old school. He hated me. Said I reminded him of someone he used to work with. Someone dirty. Said I had bad blood. Shaw leaned forward. Who? A man named Malcolm Brandt. My father. Shaw stared. You told me your father died when you were a kid. He did. But not before leaving a legacy. He was investigated in '65. He worked the Wanda case. Quietly removed from duty. Never charged. Are you saying your father was a suspect? More than that. I think he was involved. And I think someone's trying to finish what he started. The storm hadn't eased by the time they reached the archives. Dust and time clung to every file. They combed through boxes marked 1965, yellowed and brittle. Patel appeared at the doorway. We've got something. He handed over a crime scene photo from the original Wanda murders. In the background, barely visible, a man in uniform, profile turned. It's him, Brandt said. It's my father. Wait, Shaw said, holding up another photo, the one from the tunnel wall. Look at the girls. One of them has a scar on her arm. Christine never had a scar. Patel squinted. That's not Christine. Brandt's voice dropped. So who the hell is she? They laid out both photos, 1965 and now, side by side. Whoever killed Harper is staging these crimes to match the Wanda case, Shaw said. But with errors. Deliberate ones. Substitutions. Twists. Like a copycat who's not just mimicking, but rewriting history, Patel added. Or correcting it, Brandt muttered. The wind slammed against the building. Files fluttered like birds startled from roost. Shaw looked up. We need to reopen every case Malcolm Brandt ever touched. Every arrest. Every girl who went missing. Brandt's jaw tightened. We're not going to like what we find. No, Shaw said. But we need the truth. Even if it burns. The storm howled louder outside. And inside, the ghosts of Wanda stirred again. Chapter 11. Rain hammered the roof of the precinct like a warning. Shaw stood at the evidence board, Harper Doyle's face surrounded by crime scene photos, news clippings, and now, official portraits of officers from 1965. Some had aged into retirement. Few were dead. But 3 were still active in advisory or ceremonial roles. One stood out. Inspector Malcolm Reeve. Brandt entered with a fresh file. Reeve was the shift lead the night Christine and Marianne disappeared. He oversaw the beach perimeter. Shaw's jaw clenched. And he never saw anything. Not officially. Brandt handed over a report. But look at this. An anonymous call came in that night. A witness, Milvoice, described a man dragging something near the dunes. The call was logged, but the page was ripped from the record book, then reinserted weeks later. Shaw narrowed her eyes. Tampered evidence. Patel entered, breathless. DNA results came back. The blood on Harper's jacket, it's hers. But there's secondary DNA. Well, partial match to the original Wanda case files. Partial, Shaw asked, because the original evidence was degraded. But there's enough to suggest a family link. Brandt looked between them. You think Reeve has a son? Or a protege, Shaw said. The storm outside turned brutal, the wind clawing at the station windows. Shaw paced like a coiled spring. She called up an archived interview video from 1987. A teenage boy, no more than 16, sat beside Reeve at a press event. My ward, Reeve had said. Rescued from a rough home. He's staying with me now. The boy's name is Darren Hale. Shaw tapped into national records. Hale had a juvenile sheet sealed by court order, but she found employment history. He'd worked at a construction site near Wanda Beach and vanished in 2009. Patel leaned over her shoulder. Look at this. He pulled up a current lease document. Unit 14, South Point Residences. Rented last year under a fake name. Surveillance footage put him there 2 weeks ago. Shaw's adrenaline surged. Let's move. The apartment was cold. Minimalist. Shrine to control. On one wall, dozens of newspaper clippings, original and reprinted, detailing the Wanda Beach case. Photos of Christine and Marianne. Then Harper. Each image had a red thread connecting them to a central portrait. Angela Shaw. Shaw's breath caught. Her mother. Patel searched the drawers. He's been tracking her movements. Nursing home visits. Medical records. Brandt held up a tape recorder. There's a new one. Labeled this week. Shaw pressed play. Angela's voice came through, tired but clear. You don't know what you've started. Then a man's voice, low and trembling. I finished what he began. I kept his promise. Sharp click. Silence. They returned to the precinct at dawn. Shaw's hands shook as she reviewed the board. It was no longer a copycat case. It was a legacy. And Angela knew far more than she'd admitted. Shaw looked to Brandt. We need to bring her in. Protective custody. Now. But the call came too late. Angela was gone. No one saw who took her. Only her teacup remained, still warm. And in the hallway, scrawled in shaky handwriting on the wall. We all returned to the sea. Chapter 12. The sky over Sydney was bruised purple and grey as Detective Shaw sped along the coastal highway. Sirens silent, lights off. Her mind was spinning faster than the tires. Angela was gone, and someone had taken her without leaving a trace. Brandt's voice came over the comms. Still no CCTV hits. It's like she vanished. She didn't vanish, Shaw snapped. She was taken. And whoever took her knew exactly how to do it. The phrase from the hallway echoed in her head. We all returned to the sea. It wasn't just a message. It was a destination. She gripped the wheel tighter. At the shoreline near Wanda Beach, storm tides chewed away the sand, exposing bones of driftwood and concrete. Shaw stood in the wind, rain needling her face, staring at the waves. Behind her, Brant and Patel moved methodically across the dunes, searching for any trace. Then Patel shouted, "Here!" They found it in a shallow depression. Angela's shawl was soaked and snagged on a piece of rebar. Beneath it, fresh boot prints. Two sets. Patel crouched. One's heavy set. The other, smaller. Could be hers. Shaw stared toward the ocean. He's not going to drown her. He's going to make it look like the sea took her. Back at the precinct, they worked like clockwork. Shaw built a timeline. Brant tracked Hale's known associates. Patel dug deeper into the past. A name surfaced. Reeves' former partner, James Cutter. Retired in 1975. Died in 2002. But his son, Lucas Cutter, had been questioned in a 2003 beach assault. Charges dropped. No conviction. Patel looked up. Lucas worked maintenance at the same retirement home as Angela until 6 months ago. No red flags. Just left. Shaw whispered. Hale and Cutter. The watchers. The heirs. The break came when Brant returned from Hale's abandoned apartment. He'd found a torn envelope in the trash. Boat slip. Shaw's heart lurched. The marina was quiet, the storm thinning to drizzle. Row upon row of moored vessels rocked gently. Patel flagged one. The tide caller. They approached with guns drawn. No lights inside. Shaw boarded first, boots thudding on the deck. Below in the cabin a shape moved. She burst in. Angela sat on the floor, gagged but alive. Her eyes were wide with terror. Brant rushed forward to untie her. Then Shaw heard it. Creak behind her. She turned too late. The blow came fast and low, metal against bone. Stars exploded behind her eyes as she hit the wall. Darren Hale stood above her, eyes wild, face twisted with something older than rage. Behind him, Lucas Cutter held a knife, hovering near Angela. "You weren't supposed to find us," Hale hissed. Shaw forced herself upright. "You're just ghosts playing dress-up in your father's graves." Lucas growled. "He made a promise. We're finishing it." Shaw reached for her holster. "Me." Angela's voice was a croak. "Let her go." Lucas stepped forward. But Angela wasn't pleading. She was buying time. Brant appeared at the hatch, gun raised. "Drop it." Lucas hesitated. Hale lunged. Shot rang out. Hale crumpled. Lucas ran. Shaw chased him out onto the dock, rain slick beneath her boots. He slipped, fell hard, and scrambled for a hidden knife. He fired. The shot struck his shoulder. He screamed, fell into the water, and disappeared beneath the black waves. Dawn broke over the horizon. Angela was safe. Hale was dead. Cutter's body had not been recovered. But the sea had a way of returning its dead. Shaw sat beside her mother in the hospital. Angela's voice was soft. "I thought burying the truth would protect you." Shaw touched her hand. "You survived. That's what matters." Angela looked away. "There's still one more photo." Shaw's breath caught. "What photo?" Angela turned back. "Of the man who gave them the knife. The one who wore the badge." The storm wasn't over. Had just changed direction. And now it was coming from within the very institution sworn to protect them. The past wasn't buried. It had been planted. And now it was blooming. Chapter 13. The photo was clearer now. Digital enhancements stripped away decades of decay and blur. Christine and Marianne stood barefoot in the sand, grinning beneath a blistering January sun. But it wasn't their faces Shaw stared at. It was the man in the background. A shadow at the edge of the frame. Faded, partial, but uniformed. Police officer. Patel's voice was tight with disbelief. There were cops patrolling Wanda back then, but none ever admitted seeing the girls that day. Shaw studied the image. The badge glints. A shoulder patch. Whoever he was, he wanted to be in that photo. Brant leaned closer. Or he didn't care if he was. That kind of arrogance. Shaw's stomach twisted. It's not arrogance. It's ownership. Angela Shaw's words echoed. One hunted. One watched. Shaw dug through dusty personnel files from 1965, scanning names, faces, and assignments. The deeper she went, the more off-the-book shifts, unexplained reassignments, and redacted incident reports she found. Patel tapped his pen against a name. Here. Constable Roger Thorne. Stationed near Wanda. No retirement record. Disappeared in '66. Disappeared. Just gone. No transfer. No pension. Nothing. Shaw's instincts howled. Pull every file on him. I want to know where he lived, who he knew, and why he vanished. The house was still standing. An old Federation cottage buried behind salt-crusted brush, its windows shuttered and yard overgrown. Shaw stepped through the gate, her boots crunching on broken shells. Inside it smelled like time. Secret. The living room was a museum of the twisted. Police badges lined the mantel. Newspaper clippings yellowed and curled, pinned to a corkboard, each one detailing the Wanda case. In the center, a photo album. Shaw opened it slowly. Page after page of children. Girls. Smiling. Running. Unaware they were being watched. Some of them were dead. Some were missing. Some were Harper Doyle. Her breath caught. In the final sleeve was a recent photo. Taken last week. The front door slammed. Shaw spun, gun raised. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, creaked across floorboards. Brant's voice, low and urgent. You okay? She exhaled sharply. Just found his shrine. We're in his head now. He looked past her, eyes hardening. And he's in ours. They left the house in silence, evidence bagged, the album sealed. Back at the precinct, Patel pointed at the map. Another girl went missing yesterday. 15. From Newcastle. Blonde. Same pattern. Brant growled. He's escalating. Shaw nodded. He's hunting in a new radius. And he's taunting us. Patel pulled up a video feed from a train station. A girl walking alone. A man following. Not clearly visible, just the shape, the build. But Shaw knew. The hunt was on again. And this time the ghost wore a badge.